So I'm Christopher Sprinkle, producer here at Brave New Foundation, and I am here hosting Brave New Conversations. Have the pleasure of introducing Chris Shiflett, band member of Foo Fighters, band member of Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, a long line of other credits to his name, but also a very well-versed activist who writes blogs for the Huffington Post and has done videos for a number of different other campaigns, who takes his activism seriously and made a perfect date for a Brave New Conversation. So welcome, Chris.
And a cheap date, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have no money. So, but welcome to Brave New Conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start just initially and just talk about music first, because if your name ever comes up, that's the first thing somebody's going to mention, and just talk about your roots and your influences when you were younger, and kind of go into how that affected your politics.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I was lucky enough to have older brothers, and they were both really into music from before the time that I was born. So my earliest memories are of their record collections, you know, the Beatles records, Elvis records, Stones records, Bowie records, you know, just stuff like that. And we just always, you know, music was like, you know, some families are into sports or whatever. Some families are into going to school, maybe, I don't know. But we were into music, and that was it. You know, that was the only thing I was ever passionate about as a kid. And it was the only thing I ever wanted to do, you know, when I got to an age where, you know, where you start to think about that kind of stuff. And I was actually totally apolitical, you know, until I was, you know, in my mid-20s, I guess. But sort of unknowingly was influenced by, you know, The Clash and Bad Religion and bands that sort of sang about political stuff, or even like Bob Marley, you know, you sort of don't realize some ideas are getting in there. But the first time that all kind of connected for me was the first time I ever toured Europe, when I was in a band called No Use for a Name, and I'd never been outside the United States, you know, just like a lot of people. I just never really went anywhere. And the first time I went to Europe, I remember being kind of pissed off at a lot of the kids that would come interview us, because, you know, all these kids, little like punk rock kids that write fanzines, would ask these really kind of mean questions about American politics, and I didn't know anything about American politics. I really just sort of never paid attention. Sort of had this vague idea that authority was, you know, bad and whatever that sort of meant to rock and roll. But like I never really thought about it. And I remember I came home and I was talking to my dad, and I just, oh, you know, all these people over there, they just have superpower envy, you know, they're just jealous of us and all that stuff. And my dad, and, you know, it's actually funny, it's like going back a little further, I actually have pictures of myself from during the first Gulf War, with like, you know, I support the war shirts, like, ooh, you know, like I was a fucking idiot, you know. But I was talking to my dad about that, and he said, oh, you know, that's not what it is, you know. And he's actually sent me a book called like Chomsky for Beginners, something like, I think I still have it, and got me a subscription to Mother Jones. That was like my dad going, here, you know, check this out. You know, this might open your mind up to things. And then a lot of things started to make sense. And then I got obsessed with it for a while. You know, I sort of couldn't believe that all this stuff had been going on all these years, and it just flies in the face of sort of everything you're brought up to believe about what America is supposed to be, and you start to learn these things about what our government has actually been involved in.
Did you go, when you were starting to realize this, did you go back and were you hearing some of the music you've been listening to a little bit differently? Because so many people, I mean, we had Henry Rollins come in here, we had Billy Bragg, even Moby, all talked about how punk rock music was one of the things that really enlightened them politically and kind of opened their eyes, as well as traveling. Henry Rollins was very much the same way, and getting away from where you were comfortable. And but when you really listen to that stuff, especially now when I'm older, because punk rock was very influential for me becoming awakened politically, you listen to that stuff and you're like, God, I just wasn't paying attention when I was really young, or it just kind of seeped in somehow beneath the skin. Was it ever that way with you?
Absolutely. I mean, when you listen to The Clash or Billy Bragg or Bad Religion, any of those bands that are pretty political, you know, like their lyrics, I wasn't really paying it. I guess I just wasn't paying attention to the lyrics. I wasn't really putting it together. But so when you get awakened to sort of the realities of what happens in our political system and how it affects the rest of the world, yeah, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
You know?
And what were some of the first things that, as a result of traveling and as a result of kind of waking up politically, that you became passionate about or wanted to actually try to help in any way you could?
You know, I don't know. Like, for a long time, I felt like, you know, I want to be involved, but how do I get involved? You know, I didn't. It's even, you know, not even that long ago, even through like the 2000 election or the 2004 election, I just felt like, God, you know, I want to do something that isn't just writing a check or whatever. You know, I want to actually go out and be a part of something. It just took a while. You know, you just keep, you know, there's like Democracy for America started, and you go out to a couple of those meetings and you meet some people, like-minded people, and one thing leads to another, and it just sort of happens. Especially now, it's not hard to find through whether it's, you know, Move On or DFA, some of those, or even, you know, Act Blue to give to the right people. And
well, let's talk about a little bit. Right now, one of the things that I know you had talked about previously when you'd come here and spoken with Erica, of like in 2008, there was just this amazing euphoria going on with the potential for Obama, and Obama getting into the office, and everything was going to be, you know, strawberry shortcake and just happiness from that point on. Everything would be reversed.
Look at those hopeful kids.
Yeah, I know. And they're
the future of America.
And now there are so many people where we're still complaining, we're still thinking, God, these Democrats can't do a goddamn thing, and there is this frustration and there's a disappointment. And are you feeling that from after 2008?
Well, definitely. Without it, and you know, you don't want to be too Debbie Downer about it. You know, it shouldn't come as that. I don't think it should come as that big of a surprise, really, because the Democratic Party has been, you know, has sort of bought into center-right ideas for a long time. You know, and I think a lot of us were hopeful that Barack Obama would do things different, but it was pretty clear, you know, from before the inauguration. It's like he's appointing guys like Larry Summers. You're like, oh, well, fuck that. You know, we're going down that road. Okay, it's over. But you know, so but you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to be too negative about it. It's like, I think if anything, the disappointment that a lot of people feel on the left shouldn't. More than ever, we need to be engaged and active in the political process, because it's still better to have a Democrat in office, and with the wide majorities that they have, there's still possibility there for good things to happen, and it's up to us to, you know, be the ones that pull them. They're not just gonna, you know. I don't buy into this idea. A lot of my progressive friends, and I argue about this with people all the time, but think that Obama's this like closet liberal, that he's just hemmed in by the conservatives, and oh, if it was up to him, you know, he'd do everything a lot different. I just don't see that, and I don't buy into the idea that he's just getting bad advice because he appointed those guys to give him bad advice. I think that's what he is. He's a center-right, corporatist Democrat, and I think it is disappointing from a progressive point of view, but. What I'm going to do, or what I'm doing, is I'm not going to vote for those guys anymore. If you're not an outspoken, bold progressive, you do not get my vote, and I'm not going to write you checks anymore. You know, there was that great Chris Hedges article a week or two ago on Truthdig, and I think the headline was something like, what was it? Ralph Nader was right about Obama, something like that. You should all go read this article. It's a great article. I agreed with everything in it, except for the idea that we should just abandon the Democratic Party. I think we should not quite do that. I think we should abandon the ones that don't share our, you know, our goals or our ideology. You know, there's still good ones like Marcy Winograd here in LA that's running in a primary challenge against Jane Harman, and guys like Anthony Weiner and. Whoever, you know, Grayson and what's his name down there that's running against Blanche Lincoln. You know, there's some people. You know, we should support the ones that are trying to do the right thing, and just, you know, don't vote for Dianne Feinstein. I don't know. Because you know, the right. Also, I think we need to make the distinction very clear that in the mainstream media, it's always portrayed as left and right. Democrats on the left, Republicans on the right, and that isn't it. The leadership of the Democratic Party has been center-right for a long time. So it's really, if you're talking Democrats and Republicans, you're talking far-right, center-right. That doesn't, it's bad for the progressive movement, to have people associate what the Obama administration does with liberal ideas, because to me that's not what they are.
So what do you say if it's the far right and then the center right? What do you call the Tea Party movement and teabaggers who are freaking out about having somebody who's center right in charge of the government?
Well, right. I mean, this goes into like, why doesn't look what's happened in the healthcare debate. We've had this year and change of wasted time of Obama trying to be bipartisan and trying to do whatever he can to peel off a couple Republican votes, and obviously that never happened. They finally come around to the idea that they're going to have to do this thing through reconciliation, which is what they should have done from the start, because then you bypass not only the Republicans, but you bypass guys like Max Baucus. So it was always going to happen that way anyway. So now that we're at that point, are they going to go back and fix through reconciliation like all the things that they should have done right the first time? Like, probably not. But it's frustrating, because anything that these guys do, anything that Obama does is going to be, they call him a socialist and a Nazi and this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. Like, his health care plan could have been, hey, free Band-Aids for everybody. And they still would have said, oh, socialist Band-Aids, this is, we can't, they're ruining America. So, they need to wake up and
well, you wrote a blog in the Huffington Post not long ago. I have to look at the quote itself. But you wrote, quote, "What a strange summer it was with the ongoing spectacle of angry, mostly white Americans protesting, often with guns, a president and his policies that would in all likelihood improve their quality of life." What do you think is the root of that? Like, where is that coming from? Is that people who are so scared of anything that seems like change, or are they scared of a black president? Is it race involved?
It's probably all of the above. It's probably all that. But I think it's interesting the sort of the grievances. This angry populist rage that's out there. It's on the left and the right, and it's basically people are pissed off about the same stuff. It's it's, the game is stacked against the average American, in favor of whatever you want to call it, the corporate elite. The solutions are obviously very different, but it's the same anger that's riling up both sides, and the Tea Party whole thing gets more coverage, and obviously you can't discount how those people feel. They're angry because their quality of life has suffered. It's been suffering for a long time. But if you really want to have a serious conversation about why that is, it's got nothing to do with Obama being a socialist. It's got everything to do with both parties, the two-party system we have here. Both parties have bought into the same bad ideas for like the last 30 years.
Yeah, and they're all getting their money from the same people.
Yeah, and that's the bigger issue. We can sort of debate, what health care and, re-regulating banks and all the rest of it, and immigration, everything. The big issue is campaign finance reform. Because the money's too big. I mean, you have to, in my opinion, if the Democratic Party, if Obama, they should have for a long time now been sort of redefining what the role of government should be for people. Because you've had decades of right-wing propaganda telling people that government is bad, that liberalism is bad, and people just buy into that. Most people, I think, are just kind of liberal by nature. Most people I know, if you go sort of issue to issue and you don't say, like, are you a liberal? If you ask that question, they're going to say, no, that's big government, blah, 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 socialism. But if you just sort of go issue to issue, most people are on our side with this stuff, Yeah.
Can we talk about just your political views and your position as being in the Foo Fighters and having that luxury of being able to travel the world, talk to people, but also being able to write a blog on Huffington Post, and people are going to turn to it because of who you are, and being outspoken and making that decision. was it ever an issue within the band? Because I mean, I know just us posting or you posting that you were going to be here, there were people on the Foo Fighters Facebook page that were like, why the hell are you going to that crazy place? Like, what is it, you know, there is, you know, in legendary, you know, other musicians have fought with that, like the issue of having fans that don't agree with you politically or might have beat you up in high school. And how do you come to terms with that? But then how do you as a band figure out if there is a line that you can or can't cross to, you know, not turn into the Dixie Chicks or something?
Right. Well, you know, I don't know. There's never been a big kickback for us over anything I've said or done. So, you know, maybe tonight that'll be different. We'll see. This is probably getting out to a lot of people. Who knows? And, you know, I can't speak for, you know, everybody else in the band's political viewpoints, but I try not to, you know, I'm not like on stage, you know, preaching to the crowd or anything. And yeah, I can tell you, it's funny because I think it must have been when in the '04 election, I had never been a post board person. I never really knew. And so when I discovered, wow, we have this post board and there's you can talk to your fans and it's like immediate. And all so I started posting a lot of political stuff and links to, you know, articles in The Nation or whatever it was. And I was like shocked at the responses, and people would just tear you to pieces. And it had never occurred to me, like, wow, we have all these sort of conservative fans, you know? I don't know, to me, like rock and roll, it's like about rebellion and sort of anti-establishment, right. I don't know. And I would actually find myself getting into arguments with people on the post board, and I was like, oh, what am I? I'm like arguing with a 12-year-old. Like, so like, why am I? What is the what good is this doing? But you know, I try not to, you know, use the band to get my political views across. I just kind of do what I do, and you know, I'm in the band, so. I'm not representing the band's, like I'm not here as official Foo Fighter business, you know? It's just me, I'm a citizen and I have an opinion and that's it.
When you do, like you said, you just did this acoustic tour down the West Coast. In your personal music, does politics ever enter into it?
Yeah, sometimes. You know, I write some political stuff. It's tough, you know, because you have to, with a sort of a pop song, you have to boil stuff down into, you know, 3 verses and a chorus, you know? And you gotta make it rhyme. So that can be challenging. And you know, I'm no Joe Strummer, I'm no Bob Dylan. So you write stuff and you think like, oh man, I can't go out there and say that. I sound like an idiot.
Well, you said you have 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
Have you, as a result of that, even become more political as you're worrying about them or thinking about their future?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, having kids is a total game changer. You know, it changes everything. Your whole life is flipped upside down for the better. But of course, you know, you think, you know, you want our kids to grow up and have a better chance than we did. And you know, it's tough. I mean, look what's happening right here in California with school budget cuts and everything else. You know, it makes you think about the future more. Yeah, without a doubt.
What do you think? I mean, you sound from just earlier, sound very well versed in local politics and what is happening. What are you, if anything, are you just following what's happening in California, or are you doing any work here with people who are trying to make some changes here and try and fix the budget and?
Well, I'm going to go do a play at this benefit gig for Marcy Winograd. It was going to be April 3rd. I think it's moved to May 30th now. It's going to be down in Redondo. So, you know, when we get some details on that, I'll put that up. But yeah, I think it's important to go out and support, you know, progressive Democrats that are running against, corporatist incumbent Democrats. You know, we need to go support those people.
What are, besides, well, actually, I want to talk about healthcare again, because it does seem like something with Acorn and Healthcare for America Now. You did that video that was up on YouTube and on their site talking about healthcare reform, and you've been really fighting for this for a while. What brought you to that as one of the things that you were going to be that passionate about? Because I know just musicians and healthcare and health insurance has a long history. I mean, all the way back from like the 90s and the sweet relief for Victoria Williams and just a lot of stories of musicians, incredibly talented musicians who might not have made a ton of money, but they were very well respected, get sick or have an accident and they can't do anything. Was it because of those kind of connections that brought you to healthcare, or was there something else that made that your big issue?
You know, I think in this last year, I think just the fact that that was sort of the first big thing that they tried to tackle. But I mean, my own personal experience, it's actually kind of funny. I was living in New York. This was years ago. But at the time, I wasn't covered. So I was going to see. I was covered. I just went and bought Blue Cross, you know, and I went to the doctor in New York, and I wanted to get a physical. In my adult life, I'd never gotten a physical. You know, through your 20s and stuff, you don't really pay attention to that sort of stuff. But I've been touring for a few years at that point, and I felt like, you know, we're taking a break. I'm going to go find out, make sure everything's working. I went in there and I just basically spilled my guts to my doctor. You know, I've done this and I've done that, and I just want to make sure everything's kind of working. You know, and you can probably figure it out for yourself. I was a young guy in a band, and I did everything you would expect. And so, you know, I wasn't thinking at the time, you know, they write that in your records. So when I moved back out to California, I just thought, oh, you know, I'll just get Blue Cross here. And actually, I got rejected by Blue Cross. I couldn't get coverage by Blue Cross because I'd been honest to my doctor, and which sort of overlooked the whole point that I was perfectly healthy. Like, you know, there's nothing wrong with me, but it's a joke, you know. It doesn't work. Our healthcare system here doesn't work. And whatever compromised bill gets passed and whatever they do through reconciliation, it's not going to be Medicare for all. And that's what it should be. It should be Medicare for all. And, you know, we should all be able to buy into that. And that would solve the problem. And we could pay for it. And don't let anybody tell you we couldn't. It's so easy. Roll back the Bush tax cuts. Roll back the Reagan tax cuts.
Get out of Afghanistan.
Get out of Afghanistan. You know, rethink defense spending.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, but one thing
this has been really enjoyable for me. I never get to talk about this stuff in interviews ever.
Yeah,
I should have made some notes. I'm sure I forgot how. I've been like thinking for the last couple days, like, don't be negative, don't be negative. Every time I start talking about this, my wife's always like, God, you're so negative.
Well, the last question I wanted to ask, sitting here, I saw your tattoo. It says, "The future is unwritten. Know your rights." Where does that come from?
Well, that's on the back of Combat Rock by The Clash. It's funny, when I got that tattoo, my mom saw a picture of us, like a promo shot, that I think I maybe sent her with some stuff, and she hadn't seen that, and I get this message from my mom. I just want to tell you, I think it's a really bad idea that you put a gun on your arm. That is just a bad association. People are going to get the wrong idea. And it's actually, she's right. Because everybody sees it. It's a frickin' Clash tattoo. It's like the most liberal band that ever existed. And everybody thinks I'm like some militia right-wing nut, when they see that. It's like, no.
Well, I just, to wrap up, I want everybody to know, and everybody who's streaming as well, to go to facebook.com/bravenewconversations. We're going to be doing more of these in the future. Hopefully they'll all be as fun as this one. And I want to thank Chris Shiflett so much for coming in and talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Very nice stuff. That was fun. Anybody, while we're just in here before he runs off, anybody in here have a question?
Totally apolitical for most of that, but I was listening to the exact same music as you, and it didn't really sink in until Bush stole the election in Florida. It really, my parallel is very similar to yours. And so,
well, it's interesting. I first started touring in 1995. I've been playing music since I was about 11, playing in bands since I was 14, but I didn't start touring until 1995. And the change in the way people felt about America, sort of before Bush was in office, and then after, was striking. And then the change, I got to tell you, I went into Brixton Prison with this Jail Guitar Doors organization to go teach a guitar class last year. I did an interview with the prison radio station, and the guy I did the interview with told me that the night that Barack Obama was elected, the prison went crazy. Everyone was like lighting shit on fire, hanging it out the window, screaming, banging their like. I mean, that's like such a powerful image, like a powerful moment. Like it just like in that one moment, like redefined for people what America could be, and we just haven't gotten there yet.